Welcome to Thursday night special edition of the Final Boss Podcast. With me tonight as my special guest, Sharon Alston. And we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about her. She has a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of information that she's bringing to the table on tonight's subject for episode number 78, self-reflection and self-love. But before we get into it, we are here, people. Episode number 78. Can you believe it? I cannot believe that we are here for episode number 78. To the final bosses out there, to my smarts, thank you. Please continue to like, share, subscribe, send stars, send us some feedback. We love feedback. Give us an email at info@thefinalbosspodcast, oneword.com. That is info@thefinalbosspodcast.com. Listen, before we start, two things I have to do. I have to give the disclaimer. This is for entertainment purposes only. And the greeting of the day. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night to everyone out there who are tuning in and who are joining us around the world. Thank you so much. We are here. Before we get into the brass tacks, y'all know I gotta do the brass tacks. Brass tacks is the quote that leads us into the conversation of the night. I have to give you guys my admin notes for the evening. And I know I'm like Santa Claus. Listen, I know if you're naughty and nice, and right now you guys are being real naughty. You need to go get some merch. I'm not gonna go get some merch. The merch site is up. Go get some merch at www.thefinalbosspodcast.com. One word. Thefinalbosspodcast.com. One word. That's the merch site. Go get some merch. All right. So before we get into our special guest of the evening, I have to give you guys my brass tacks. My brass tacks comes from Mark Nepo. And is in relation to our topic tonight, self-love and self-reflection. I've learned that loving yourself requires a courage unlike any other. It requires us to believe in and stay loyal to something no one else can see that keeps us in the world, our own self-worth. That's coming from Mark Nepo. That's our brass tacks for tonight. Listen, people, we got an amazing show. I have the Sharon Alston. She has over 20 years in experience dealing with media companies, communication companies when it comes to HR. Her wealth of knowledge has brought us to the conversation that we're about to have. We're going to be talking about self-love and self-reflection. So, Sharon,
yes,
how are you?
I'm great. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you over the next hour. So I'll wait on you.
All right. We're going to delve into the profound art, man. And the art is the art, and there's no escaping it. Self-love and self-reflection. And of course, thank you for being here. We're going to be exploring the intricate dance between self-reflection and self-acceptance, uncovering the pathways into inner harmony. But you know what, man? For your experience and our friendship, I really appreciate you. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's give her a round of applause. All right. So, my question before we get into the heavy and nifty, the heavy stuff.
Sure.
You had mentioned in your video promo,
yeah,
a topic that I had no knowledge on, which is rare because I think I'm pretty knowledgeable on a lot of things. You mentioned something in regards to something called the 3 M's. Can you
Yes.
care to elaborate on that and how it fits into tonight's conversation?
Yes. So, by career, I have been working in HR for a really long time, but I've been on this earth over 40 years as a human being, as a woman, and so that's where my wisdom and my experience and what I'll be my testimony for tonight will be about. So as it relates to 3 M's, it's just kind of understanding the backbone, and I was leaning into how this is most important for women, but it certainly has a relevance to men based on conversations that I've been having recently, just before this podcast, like a day ago. So the 3 M's are menstruation, maternity, and menopause. Those are the 3 cycles of life that women
Okay.
go through that start anywhere from age 8, which is kind of like your puberty. And then menopause can go up into the upwards of your 60s. So all within that window,
Wow.
women are going through all types of changes, both emotionally, hormonally,
Mhm.
spiritually, physically. And so just that alone, I say, to men, to women, to ourselves, to our loved ones, that's where the grace is backboned. That women, for pretty much outside of just being a child, are going through these changes. And through these changes, lots of things are happening with your health, with your self-esteem, with your time, with your desires, with your careers. And so, in short, those 3 M's are the stages for which most women will travel at least 2 of those 3 stages, if not all 3.
Wow. That's a lot of information. Thank you for sharing that. And it's so interesting that you would bring that and how we're going to tie it into tonight's topic. Those are all essential. And like you said, men, my men folk, hey, listen up, men. And to my smarts and final bosses, my men folk, listen. You have to understand your women folk, whether it's the one that you're in a relationship with or the ones that are closest to you. It may be your mother or your sisters, and you have to. It's
Your
all
children,
about empathy. It's
right?
all about empathy. You have to have that understanding that they're going through something that you're not going through, bro. Like, it's all about empathy. Empathy is something that we talk about on this platform all the time. You have to be empathetic. Put yourself in her shoes and see where she's coming from and have an understand. Try to have an understanding of why she is the way she is. Do some research. Do some research, bro. Do some research. But yeah, that is truly amazing and great information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then remember your children, like your
Yeah.
children and
Mhm.
others that are coming along, they are also in this very interesting change of life, and you get to see it a little differently. When you meet your companion, they're kind of already grown and going through a very like stage 2,
Right.
possibly.
Right.
But as you're watching children and you're like, who are they? What's happening? They're really going through conditionally, particularly women, changes all the time that
Mhm.
the word empathy is really important because you could never really be in the shoes of what that feels like, both from a personal standpoint, but even
Exactly.
the workplace.
Right.
There
True.
isn't enough support for women in the workplace, whether you're talking
Mhm.
about benefits or other accommodations. The laws in some states are pushing forward to that, but just naturally there isn't really accommodations for women as you're going through any number of these stages, every month.
Well,
That it exists, so
mm,
there's no time off. There's no days off from this.
right. Wow. And
Yeah.
you're so true. So true. Mothers. I'm gonna leave that alone.
Okay.
I'm gonna leave it alone.
Later, maybe we'll rope back to that.
Right. But what I was gonna say is y'all job is never over. It
Right.
being a mom 24/7, 365, it doesn't end. So yeah, that's all I was gonna say.
Okay.
But yeah, thank you for sharing that. So let's get into it. Let's get into tonight's topic.
Okay.
First, let's unpack the multifaceted nature of self-love. It's more than just feeling good about yourself, isn't it?
It's definitely more than just that. And let me just put a disclaimer. Like I don't have a medical background. I'm not trying to give anyone advice or therapy or anything like that. I'm speaking from a point of view that is my own through my own testimony or just things that I've witnessed over the years with friends and others and family. It's multi-layered, right? What I think comes from that is taking back something that we've been fostering to give other people. We give so much of ourselves to other people as we become adults. We have all these requirements and all these expectations put upon us. And I absolutely believe that it is multifaceted, but a lot of times we are struggling to figure out which one is the right priority to take because we're struggling between a lot of toxicity around, impressions of like how we should look based on social media or just kind of, living in a world where we're no longer exist. Like we're not 25, we're not going back to our 25th year old, self. And so I think that a lot of this is about making peace with where you are and how far you've come. And maybe you've accomplished a lot of things that you wanted to, maybe not, you have some things to do. But
Right.
for me, my center focus is peace of mind. And peace of mind comes with settling on many different things in my life that probably are upsetting to some people because it's very focused on me.
Okay.
But I do
That's fair.
think that, at this point in life where I am, that's the right place and this is the right time to do that. Now, I would definitely encourage people to really focus on that all throughout, but I learned later in the game.
Yeah.
So I am like catching up for all the time.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong, and this, in my opinion, there's nothing wrong with loving on you and taking care of you and being selfish about you and your needs and the things that are going to make you happy. That's what's important.
Okay. So, I'm a person of words, right? And
Right.
selfish, I think, is about someone else's opinion of you. It's not
Okay.
selfish. That's just someone else's opinion of your actions, not taking their priority or their interests at heart first.
Okay.
And I also feel like a lot of times we are trying to appease others more than we are focused on self, worth. And being happy, I think, is a broad term because people are constantly like searching for what does that mean. So I think feeling good, feeling healthy, feeling proud are more centralized things that you can maybe hold on to because happiness is so broad and it has many layers to what it could be. That's just, my POV to kind of center myself because happiness is so broad.
Right. So it definitely is multifaceted. So yeah, absolutely. I agree with you 1,000%. What are your thoughts on, when you think about self-reflection, right? And how self-reflection is key to unlocking self-love. But how do we move beyond the superficial introspection to truly understand ourselves?
I think that requires you to have a lot of self-talk and a lot of moments in time alone, right? To understand who you are, what your needs are, what your likes are, what your dislikes are. I think a lot of things are driven by Western civilization norms, things that we keep pouring into our brains from social media.
Right.
And I just think that's no way to find out who you are. Like you have to spend time by yourself with yourself, and people probably fear that most because people don't like the idea or the feeling of being alone. And that is when the rubber meets the road. This is who you are. This is what you have going on, and either we can be really proud of that, or we know we have work to do, but you can't really ignore it through all of the noise of having distractions around you. So I think that even when you're talking about being in between relationships, like spend real time after relationships. Don't go back and say, oh, it's been 6 weeks, or, oh, I'm going to go back to, social media and go through my DMs and see who's in there. Like, you really have to say, what made this go wrong? Who am I showing up to be? How do I, make connections with the right type of person in the future? It could be a job. What did I love about it? What did I not like about it? How was I showing up on my best days and my worst days? What did people, see, on the other side?
Okay.
So I think spending time alone and asking yourself those hard questions and digging in to do the right work is essential. Like, sometimes you need support, but you need support from people who will be honest with you. And a lot of times we want support from people who will be agreeable, who will make us feel better about, our shortcomings or the things that we know are not the best, or being the best selves, being our best self. But I think that a lot of times we have to find other sources that are trusted, that mean well. And also, really, if it requires, having some therapy, I think 100%.
Absolutely.
That's what you should do.
Okay.
So, all the stigma around therapy and things like that, and having someone is of the past. Everyone has talked to someone, whether it's a pastor or a mentor, etc. Those not necessarily clinical by trade, but certainly having a similar way about giving you guidance and light.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, what are your thoughts? What
I was going to say, it takes a strong individual to be able to curtail and maneuver through all of those identifying and challenging characteristics that have to deal with not self-trauma, but trauma, and trauma that that's impacted us culturally. But not only that, but how we were raised. So having, I think that stigma, it still has a grip on our culture, but in my opinion, it's loosening, because you hear more people are talking about going to therapy. You hear more people are talking to others, and not just yes men. I'm talking about people who have unbiased opinion, who are there to give you some good feedback. And I'm all about the good feedback and the critical criticism. I want to get better in all aspects, whether it's in business, whether it's about this podcast, relationship wise. I'm always looking at myself, doing introspection and thinking about how not only did I make that person feel, but what I did or what I said, how did that affect that person? And if it came out the way I wanted to. And because sometimes like you said, words, right? I did an episode on in season 1, words have power.
They do.
And sometimes words get lost in translation. It depends on a lot of different characteristics, how it was delivered, the your voice octaves, the cadence, all these other things play into that, and so I'm equally tuned in with my finger on the pulse when it comes to those things that you just mentioned. So
and we also know that the words that we express when we are upset, angry, are equally important, and those are the ones that stick with people the longest.
Absolutely.
All your actions of intentions and good intentions and apology, that really doesn't take away the scar tissue, and that's where the trauma adds onto yesterday's trauma, or 2 years ago, or last boss, or last relationship. And so I think need to be at this stage being really intentional about when we're upset, how do we handle anger, which probably is a completely different
right.
show around, that, but really being intentional to stop before you go into a path where you say things to someone that you say you care about, that you say you love, that ultimately damages them, which again interrupts and can actually alter one's opinion around self-love, self-worth, peace, things like that. And I think in that moment, people, feel like that's what makes sense. But I will tell you 10 times over, it scars everyone in the room, because one person is going to say thing and someone else is going to say something else. And if we use more time, coaching people up and, cheering each other on, we would be much better overall in terms of like social and mental health. I
agree. At this stage of life, what I've noticed talking to other adults around the same age bracket, I've noticed that some people have trigger words. You can have a whole conversation with someone, and the conversation, let's say the conversation is going on for like 5 minutes, but you mentioned a trigger word. That trigger word does something to them mentally where, and look, I'm not an expert on this, but I'm just giving, this is my opinion. Right. And it's entertainment purposes only. But they didn't hear anything else you said but that trigger word.
Yeah.
Have you seen that? Have you seen that?
All of us have trigger words. All of us have it, even if it's something like "shut up." I mean, like it's things you just, like you just kind of,
right,
like crash out about.
Yeah.
Everyone has them because there's some boundary. There's some something seated in us, memories that we either suppress or we very directly know exists. And yes, we all have trigger words. And I think many of us know what some of them, fence towards based on, if you're being vulnerable with people or you're being, just mean spirited, what's probably going to trigger someone or at least the subject matter. Yeah. So all of us have trigger words. I have like a million. So I'm never not triggered probably.
Wait, hold on. So you're new to the show and you don't know that I do this, but flag on the play. Flag on the
being honest.
A million trigger words.
Like a million trigger words. It could be, but it's things that I think people sometimes don't mean to be offensive. And I can just tell you something like that's culturally relevant. I don't care what race. But I get triggered when men say, "I like your hair straight." Because when I wear my hair, in a natural state, which is curly or wavy,
right? Yeah,
that's really my natural state. So when I wear it, straight or blown out, it may give me a little variety change. I may have just recently had a haircut or something like that. So when you say things like that, then I say, or someone says, "What are you mixed with?" That's like the first or maybe second question that someone says, and then it's. So there are things that maybe not with bad intentions, but even those types of things can trigger people. And so it doesn't have to be something, super, offensive or vulgar, but it can be socially or personally offensive because, Black is not monolithic. It doesn't work that way. It's not one color. It's not one feature. Your parents are a combination of things. And so you just have to be thoughtful about the things that you say, because I'm really touchy about colorism and probably a different topic for a different day.
Yeah.
But when I say a million things could trigger me, it could be something like that feels like a social conversation. Because I've never gone up to a man and said like any of those questions. Right. So I just, I don't understand why that's the opening act.
Well, for knowing you for 30 plus years, I'm glad I've never hit any of those million trigger words. Oh man, I gotta give myself a clap for that one. Damn. So listen, thank you for sharing. That was some great information. You know, I put down colorism because because ours just isn't enough time. And I would love to have you back on the show, and we could definitely talk about colorism. That's a subject that is definitely worthy of having a deep conversation. And that's what we do on the Final Boss podcast. We have the most deepest, difficult conversations there are. And that's why we're here. So we're going to keep on moving.
Okay.
We talked about a lot of different subjects thus far, and relates to women, self-reflection, self-love, identifying, challenging, and beliefs, right? Some people's beliefs are so limited that it can sabotage their own self-love, in my opinion. How can we identify and effectively challenge these ingrained patterns?
So give me a little more context when you say patterns. Patterns, as you know, what are we talking about possibly?
We're talking about, let's use social media for instance.
Yeah.
People are right now developing beliefs on how they see individuals based off of what they see on social media, right? Mm-hmm. So you and I both know that we have a sane amount of intelligence to know that everybody's not the same. But because we see these actions and the way they're being portrayed, people are starting to identify with that this person is like this because I seen this person do the exact same thing. So when it comes to sabotage and self-love, you are blocking yourself, right? You're blocking yourself with not being open to the idea that not only is everybody not the same, but when it comes to self-love, it's you creating like this internal crutch. You know what? If you did I explain that okay?
So let me just say, as it relates to women, like, you know, again, I touched on this a little bit.
Okay.
You know, when we look at, you know, westernized expectations around, you know, looks and what's beauty and the beauty standards, they typically don't fit, you know, with the, you know, scope of African Americans.
Right.
They're lifted in a certain way. And then we are, you know, looking at each other and trending and following each other. I think that we still have to remember that, you know, a friend of mine had recently gotten her hair dyed and she didn't like the color of her hair.
Okay.
And I said, oh, show me what you were, you know, going for. And she shows me a picture. And I said to her, like, that's a wig. You're not going to be able to likely achieve that particular color because that is based on artificial hair. I don't know if it's plastic or what it's made of, but that's not how hair looks. And because you're taking your hair like 12 shades lighter from a color like mine currently into some other, you know, blonde that strips and then puts back in some other color to make it reddish. You know, we are oftentimes, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with like finding a style in a way that you admire and you like, but I think that we do take something away from ourselves when we look around the room and we don't feel like other people in the room or other people on social media, which we know 99% of that is just not real. It's people having their best moment and their best time, and they're just happen to capture it and share it with you. But that's, no one feels like that all day, every day.
Right.
And that's why, you know, even, you know, just backstory, like these, you know, series that are like reality TV, they're really captured in like 4 weeks. You know, think all of this is happening all the time. It's not. It's like 4 weeks,
right?
Spread over 14 weeks, and then you're like, "Oh my gosh, this person's life week to week." It's not. It's absolutely not. And I think that, you know, I find myself going places into the drugstore. I'm like, "Oh, well, should I get some collagen, or should I get, you know, hyaluronic acid, and should I do this and should I do that?" And we're always kind of chasing a version of ourselves that has probably passed.
Right.
And part of that is walking away from that saying, I'll just get face wash, I'll get a great moisturizer, and I'll get a nicely, matched foundation, and it should be fine. But you have to kind of get to that place to simplify it to, in our age, just things are going to change. They have to change. They should change.
They should change.
Yeah. And so walking into that, but, the person that typically has the most influence is the companion. The companion really drives how that woman feels and thinks and sees herself. And although that's another topic for another day that, we can consider, there's a responsibility, I feel like, for men to be thoughtful about that, because that's where a lot of that pressure comes from. It's to, be pleasing visually to the person that she wants to marry or is married to or, connected to. So there's a burden of responsibility, both socially, but internally, like own it so that no one else can alter it. And so that's something that I've learned in time, is to own it so that no one else can rob me of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great perspective. That is a great perspective. You got me taking notes. Listen. Self-reflection, people. Self-reflection and self-love.
Yeah.
What about self-compassion? How do we practically cultivate it? Do you have, in your opinion, what do you have? You got any ideas on that?
I call it something different. I just call it grace. And a male actually taught me that in the workplace. He said, look, we're going to handle people and situations with grace. It's tough, it's difficult, and, but we want them to be, managed in a way that has them walk out the door and understanding that this was a tough decision, but this is what it is. And that's coming from the HR realm, right? There's a lot of happy moments, but not so happy moments in terms of like what we do as HR professionals.
Right.
But I too have to give myself grace. And it's words. It's really important for words. So I have an app that, gives me these inspirational quotes. And sometimes, I don't know if it's, kind of like managed through AI now because it doesn't have like an author's name. But there are things that even for myself, who I feel like I have a really good and solid foundation of who I am and healthy, self-confidence.
Okay.
I still look to these apps and certain other things that may have be a little more cussy, but kind of promote, that wake up call that all of us need some days, because days are hard. Life is hard. Life is life, and it is hard. And and it's the challenge is still going to be the challenge for many reasons, in this country. So I think that sometimes you really have to give yourself grace. Now, let's be fair and not be lazy and say, oh, well, I'll give myself grace for not washing my dishes or taking care of myself, but giving yourself grace, right? Being wrong, for not being able to show up to every event, for not, always feeling, glamorous. Like, that's grace. The other stuff is a little more superficial and allows you to give get yourself off the hook for doing something that you absolutely know you have plenty of time and should do. So I think that's a little different, but grace is, I think, a nicer word to practice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Grace, people. Grace. Give yourself some grace, but give others some grace. And you know what? Throw some empathy in there too.
Yeah. I think that, people, it's really interesting. Like when you're watching, social media, and then someone will come on your feed and someone's like, they're like 32 years old and they have cancer and they're like stage 3 and you're like falling, right? Yeah. Those people are walking around all the time. They're not necessarily with it on their t-shirt, but that's what I mean by grace. Yeah. I mean, there are people who are jerks, and that's just the way that the world works, but most people are not. And so, every time a woman gives me a compliment, I almost pass out. like, oh my gosh, that's so pretty. Or, it almost makes me want to pass out because I know it comes from a real place of, like I just said it. I wasn't trying to mean anything more. And
Right.
I am in the practice of thinking about things I can say to any woman I make eye contact with, the same thing, because
Okay.
it will be something simple. And I almost like get all butterflies on the inside
Okay.
because of it. And it's being graceful, because sometimes I don't feel like I'm, dolled up for walking to the store, but someone will find something that they think is totally awesome that I thought was just like I just did this thing. I don't know. I was working through it. So, I was working through it as it happened, and so the thought that, everything is well thought out and well planned is not. And there are just so many things that, sometimes a small act of kindness is really what someone needs that day. It just really is. And
Okay.
it's easy to practice. Of all the things we do, like, it costs you nothing to be nice.
It absolutely costs you nothing to give someone a compliment. But guess what else doesn't cost you anything? I like people. Like, share, subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. It is the exact same thing as a compliment. It doesn't cost you. It's in terms of how much it costs.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to bring up a point. You had mentioned something in your conversation about self, and I was going to use that as a segue into talking about self-esteem and self-love. And a lot of times they're often interchangeable. But in your opinion, what's the distinction between the two?
I think self-esteem can be more externally driven by other people that kind of push you. And like your mother and your parents and stuff, like, are like your biggest advocates, and that kind of pumps up your esteem.
Right.
I think self-love is totally an inside job. It is totally an inside job. Nobody can do it with you. No one can do it for you. No one can do it in replace of anything. It is absolutely your thing to own. Whereas self-esteem, it's like I wish that there was a real mandate for everyone to play sports. I feel like anyone who's played sports has had the benefit of, like, structure and being coached and, feeling good and being celebrated.
Yeah.
And when you don't really have that outside of, like, when you're working on a team.
Well, the military, and you know what? And my thoughts are the same. So my thoughts are, after high school, everyone should serve at least 2 years in the military. And what I mean by that is, it gives them the structure, it gives them guidance, it gives them direction, but you can learn a skill from there. But the discipline you learn from being in the military is unmatched. It is unmatched. And that's my opinion.
I would agree with that. I think anyone who's operated just as your basic civilian like myself, and who's watched things, like, we have movies, we don't really get this to look inside, but I absolutely will say that people that have been in the military, if you're around them, you will notice that they're very particular about how they make their bed, or how something is folded, or where something is placed. And not always, but certainly there are certain to, like, follow and trend with people. And there's nothing wrong with that, because I think that a lot of things in life require discipline, because you're doing things you don't want to do. You're doing things, just all the time. Like, we are under the microscope of, like, doing and doing and doing. And some of those activities, honestly, we don't enjoy, but discipline gets you through it. And I think discipline also helps you stay, forward facing in adversity. So that's why I say, with teams, you win, you lose together. And that kind of teaches you the concept of adversity and having to work together. And sometimes you are a solo player. Like, you have a job to do on that team, just like you have a job to do at the work team and your relationship. So a lot of it is universal, but not having the benefit of playing sports or being in the military. I can't speak from that, but I would say my observation leads me to same place to say, I would agree.
Okay.
I would be in agreement. Yeah.
All right. So we agree.
We agree. We agree. And I wasn't triggered by it.
Stop. You know, oh man, it's too funny. You mentioned earlier about setting boundaries.
Mhm.
And you know, when it comes to numerous things that we've been talking about, but setting boundaries for yourself is crucially important. You have to set boundaries for self-respect, self-preservation. In your opinion, because you're my subject matter expert right now, that's why you're the special guest. How do we do this effectively?
I think that's a little that's going to be difficult for me to say how we do it effectively. I think,
Okay.
you know, I'm wired for boundaries. You know, I think that even in my upbringing, you're told when to talk, when not to talk, what to do at the store, what not to do at the store. So you're, you know, sometimes just in your general grooming, you're taught boundaries, right? When to talk, do something. And then as you become an adult and you start to have break-offs from like all the things that, you know, people have been, you know, rearing you about. Boundaries come when things helps to avoid things that hurt.
Okay.
And I think that doesn't mean you're not going to experience hurt, but it doesn't allow for it to be so intimate to you that you lose yourself, right? So boundaries are important at work. Boundaries are important with your children, with your companion, your best friends.
Yeah.
You know, boundaries are important, and knowing what they are and being really clear with people that you have them and that you will either honor them or it will essentially end this, you know, relationship or connection as it exists, you know, that in that way.
Right.
But there really isn't, you know, like a prescribed way to do it. I know what doesn't make me feel good, and I don't do the things that don't make me feel good. Now, of course, we have to work and we have to do things that we are required to do as an adult. So you could always be an entrepreneur and you're still going to have those types of feelings. But you absolutely have to stop doing things that don't serve you and things that hurt you. That is, to me, the ultimate, you know, benefit and subset for boundary creation.
Now, you mentioned setting boundaries for various types of relationships. Do you find that it's more advantageous for people to put those boundaries up front? Or what I find is that as people get to know each other and they start getting comfortable with one another, now they want to put boundaries out there. What are your thoughts on that? Because I've seen that a lot.
I think that if you're talking about like a personal relationship of like dating or courting or something like that,
friends too. I mean, I'm just across the board, even family members.
Yeah, they all require different things. Like family members, you're already inherited into the situation. People always see you like at 8 years old or 12 years old, so they kind of can't unsee you as like being a child. You know,
that's true. That's
so
true.
you have to like tell them straight up, like, don't do this. Don't call me this time. Don't keep asking me about these types of things or for these things. Like it's run its course. So you, with family in particular, you have to push a little harder because it's a little bit like tone deaf for them.
Right.
I think in personal, you know, relationships where someone doesn't have the benefit of knowing you from a child all the way up, I think that's the stuff you get out of the way in the earlier places. Like what you know robs your peace, what triggers you. And I think we have to be careful about certain words, because if we keep using the word trigger, then it becomes more normalized and we like put a bunch of things into that bucket. But I think that, you know, it's really important to for someone who's getting to know you is to have those things set up early, because as you go into it, it sounds like you're changing. And then people are like, well, you know, I didn't know this about you until 6 months, you know, later, when it's very easy to really just talk about all those things up front. And look, and if the person isn't into it after that, then, you know, that's that's better timing than, 7 months from now, where
Okay.
you're trying to redirect what those boundaries are. Because I think that in the beginning, we're willing to tolerate things that we probably, that we know conditionally we don't
True.
want, don't like. And
Right.
it's very hard to undo that, because then they say, well, in the beginning, you used to, and then
Yes.
now we're,
Yeah.
can't have productive conversation because it's more about their reflection of like what it was.
Right.
Set it up front. I mean, but it can't be 15. Like, it has to be like really simple and clear things,
Mm-hmm.
like 3 to 5. Humans just can't process more than that, in my opinion. So,
Right.
I mean, what are your thoughts about the boundaries?
Well, I'm superhuman, so I don't know.
Okay.
No, boundaries are definitely necessary. Me having served in the military for such a long time and transitioning and being in the DoD space, there's a lot of structure, and I've done things from being my last position was a branch chief.
Mm-hmm.
So, and before then, I did a lot of things with analytics, constantly analyzing and doing assessments. That kind of all poured into who I've become today.
Okay.
And when I'm dealing with relationships, I'm constantly analyzing and doing assessments.
Mm.
And at the same time, although I am guilty for not putting those boundaries up front, because and I'm gonna tell you the reason why. And I can't speak for all men. I can only speak for myself.
Okay.
As a man, I have a high tolerance for a lot of different things.
Mm.
I have a high tolerance, and that stems from my childhood. That stems from the different things that I've endured up until this stage in life.
Mm.
So, because I have a high tolerance, things don't really affect me right away. You know, it's a I'm doing the math and the math is not mathing. Now, let's talk about it. Now I need to, you know what? Let's talk about a boundary that I might not have talked about before, but because of what I've seen and witnessed, the behavior is and it's repetitive, and I've mentioned it, and you haven't did any corrective action on it.
Yeah.
You haven't did any accountability on it. You know, I saw a meme today. It was hilarious. You know, they got this meme that's going around 100 men versus one gorilla, which is ridiculous. A 500 to 800 pound gorilla that stands anywhere between 6 feet to 6'5" is going to wipe 100 men easily. The animal, it has killer instinct. Not only does it have killer instinct, it has zero body fat. We're talking about, listen, but that's not what this conversation is about. But let me get into it. I saw a different meme that said 100 women versus accountability. And I just died. I thought that was hilarious. I'm so sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was hilarious. So, so when those things start taking place, and it's like these bullet points keep getting hit, and I'm like, hey, I mentioned this before. There was no accountability. There's no introspect on this and this. You deny. You don't want to talk about it. It's too much of a difficult conversation. Okay, now there's an issue.
Yeah. Well, the issue is you're not compatible at that point, because a person who just says like, hey, I'm not going to be accountable is really just saying, hey, I'm not going to even try to meet you halfway on the thought that there's something here that that's just not kosher. So
Right.
that just automatically says it. But I think that, again, waiting too long to set a boundary makes it sound like you're changing, you're altering things, and it's a
Mhm.
you problem, when it is a you problem because you've waited like a beat too long.
Yeah.
And if the behavior has gone on 1, 2, 3, 4,
That's
it's like with children, it's like with siblings. You've seen
right.
it. If you let the young
Mhm.
one keep doing it,
Yeah.
that one that gets away with everything,
Right.
that's the same concept. And so
Mhm.
that is, conditional to even adults. So I would
Absolutely. I
say,
agree. I agree. Okay.
just say like, this is the boundary and the border. Like if we cross here, we're just gonna have to do something else. Superficially, sometimes that makes people change, but sometimes it will have other people who are like growing human beings who look for growth will
Okay.
try to alter things so that
Mhm.
that doesn't make you, unhappy or displease
Right.
you. But it
Right.
needs, something really relevant. It can't like be minor, trivial things like, I don't know, you left the socks out, and I like it in this drawer instead of that drawer. Like that can't be like your breaking point, in my
Right.
opinion,
Right.
not just, regular human beings. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's my POV on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we talked about self-reflection and self-love for
Mhm.
this segment. As a part of self-love, we have not you touched on it a little bit. You talked about self-care,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
What when it comes to self-care, and do you do a holistic approach, or what kind of approach do you recommend, or and what do you do when it comes to self-care?
I think it's super simple. I don't have a holistic approach. Like I feel like
Okay.
this is a deja vu conversation. I don't have a holistic approach, and I guess when I grow up, I'll move towards that place. Um, but in this moment, things that I think are really meaningful around self care,
Uh-huh.
like go to your doctor's appointments. I'm so
Right.
serious. Like get your
Yeah.
annual exams and checks.
That part.
We are very afraid of bad news, and we
Mhm.
don't want to, but a stage 1 is different than a stage 4. Like
Absolutely.
being into
Absolutely.
proactive care.
Yeah.
We know the things to eat. We know the things to stay away from.
Mhm.
Those are all things conditional to like your body, but
Right.
we know that there are types of energies and people and
Mhm.
personalities that we are allergic to, and we need to be able to disconnect from those things. And
Right.
that is another part of it. So I don't know that I have anything holistic to bring to the table. Those are like really practical things
Okay.
that I am constantly in practice of, and I am guilty of missing the mark on all those things at some point, and
Mhm.
may continue to do that, but I am more intentional about not doing that because mind, body, spirit is one person, and so
Gotcha.
you can't neglect one without recognizing that the other could also be impacted. So
Okay.
that's really how I see that.
All right.
Yeah.
So before we close out, um, and I believe that self-love, self-care, self-reflection, we've talked about various types of ships when it comes to relationship and friendship and all those other ships. I call them ships.
Yes.
Um, what we haven't talked about, and we got a couple more minutes.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't talked about forgiveness,
Mm.
both of others and ourselves. The ability to forgive ourselves. I believe that it's essential, one, for self-love. How do you navigate that process?
I'll be completely honest with you. I don't know that there's forgiveness for other people because oftentimes we're looking for closure. We're looking for all these things that, and this is my opinion, that never show up and make us feel any better about the decision or the outcome of things spoiling. So
Mhm.
when it comes to forgiveness, it's a you job. Like you have to forgive you for overlooking those red flags. You have to
Okay.
forgive yourself for not showing up as your best self. You have to give yourself, forgiveness for wanting it more than the other person wanted it, whatever that might be. That could be your children, that could be your significant other, and it sometimes is long dark crying moments to purge and to
Right.
be able to separate and say, person X, and it could be family, it could be not family.
Mm-hmm.
This is where we separate. So sometimes forgiveness to me is really about detachment, and
Mm-hmm.
also about how you served in the thing that went wrong, and forgiving
Mm-hmm.
yourself. Don't give yourself a pass. Like, if you on that BS, you need to not do that.
Right.
But also recognizing that there are things that you intentionally did with maybe the best of intentions, or maybe not, but trying
Mm-hmm.
to forgive yourself, because trying to forgive other people is a long, hard, probably empty process. So you
Arduous.
have to move. Yeah, you just have to move on and
Mm-hmm.
say, they're never going to give me the answer that I wanted. They're never going to be able to explain it to me in a way that I can respect and understand. And so stop chasing closure.
Wow.
Stop chasing it. It is
Wow.
like the worst, like marathon that you will never stop chasing. So
Mm.
stop looking for culture, closure. And I say that even in, like, I have the worst time with it in death. Like, I just assume,
I don't deal with death. Good.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, this person is on vacation. Like, I
Yeah.
just will see them another time. But
Yeah.
the reality is, you don't understand why this person, why this time. There are so many other. You have to say, I missed that last birthday. I missed that last Thanksgiving. I have to give myself, forgiveness, because I could have went, but I had something else that I did instead. And that was the last time I got. So a lot of times it's about forgiving yourself so that you can move on.
All right.
Yeah.
Wow. 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 Just wow. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Sharon Alston.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having
Listen,
me.
absolutely. Absolutely. We're going to give you a hand because of the information that you just bestowed on us. That's life changing. We're going to take that. We're going to take notes and we're going to apply it to real life. That's what we're going to do. So yeah, let's give her a hand, ladies and gentlemen. To my smarts and to my final bosses, I hope you guys were paying attention tonight. Before we close out, do you have any closing words?
So I have a little quote that was on my little app, and it says,
Okay.
"You are the greatest project you'll ever work on. Restart, reset, refocus as many times as you need." So
Wow.
that's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, man, it was a great conversation. My thoughts: self-love is a journey, not a destination. Continue practicing self-reflection, self-compassion, and self-care. Make it a daily commitment, integrating these practices into your everyday life. My friend, thank you for this insightful conversation. Remember, final bosses, smarts, self love is a continuous process of self discovery and growth. Embrace the journey. Be kind to yourselves and celebrate your progress along the way. That is our show for tonight. Remember, be balanced, be equal, be smart. I'm the Final Boss. This is the Final Boss podcast. That's Sharon Alston. That's our guest host for tonight. Hey, if people want to contact you, is outside of here, is there a way, or just tell them to hit me up?
They can hit you up, and then I can come back. They can tell me what they want to know. They can ask
Right.
those questions. And
Right.
make a show of it. I'd love to do that.
Okay.
But I myself don't have like a direct way, but this is a great way, because I would love to join you again for another segment or two, or however many.
Absolutely.
This was enjoyable, and there's always more to learn and grow from. So thank you, my friend.
You are welcome, my friend. Listen, people, you heard it from her. Don't be trying to find her. Hit me up. Send me the questions, and I will convey it to her in kind. The email is info@thefinalbosspodcast.com. Info@thefinalbosspodcast.com. Remember, get some merch, like, share, and subscribe to the channels. Right now, we're on Facebook, YouTube, StreamYard, TikTok, Instagram, Spotify. What else? There's so many. LinkedIn. There's a couple more and more on the way. We're going to be everywhere. So that's our show tonight, man. Y'all have a great one. Listen, be kind and love yourself. Tonight's episode of self-love or self-reflection. We will see you again on this Sunday and then again on Tuesday, and every week, Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday, live at 9 p.m. See you then.